Michael Shellenberger, nice to meet you. Hello.
Thank you for having me.
You are in Berkeley, California?
Yes, I'm in Berkeley, California.
California is a hotspot right now, isn't it? What's going on there?
Well, what's going on is that we are in a crisis of governance. We do not have the leadership in California that's capable of dealing with the very high levels of crime and disorder. I think it's important for Europeans to keep in mind that Europe has twice as many police officers per capita as the United States does. And California has half as many police officers per capita as New York City. So, and if any of your listeners have ever been to Los Angeles, you'll know that it's very spread out. So it's an impossibility for the police to maintain order on their own, which is why we've seen the need for the National Guard to go and protect federal employees who are engaged in implementing President Trump's plan. And California is a very radical left state. It's not. It's not even. I think people think the Democrats might be the same all over the United States, but as you know, the United States is a very big place, and in California, the Democrats have been controlled by the radical left really since the 60s. I mean, and it's only gotten more radical since then. So what you're basically seeing is a reverse of what we saw in the 1960s when a liberal president went to enforce laws against a right-wing South. Now we see a right-wing president seeking to enforce laws against a left-wing West.
So we are in the middle of the politics of the United States. We'll continue there, but I just wanted to hear a short analysis to begin with. Now, you may tell the public who you are. Now, you are quite famous as a journalist, as an author, as an analyst, as a critical person of today's life. How would you describe yourself?
I am a working journalist. I make my living doing journalism. I have the second largest Substack for news. It's a newsletter in the United States called Substack, and mine is called public.news. I am also the best-selling author of Apocalypse Never, San Francisco, and my forthcoming book is Suicide of the Left. And then I'm also a chair of politics, censorship, and free speech at the University of Austin.
So you are like every day thinking and writing and publishing.
Doing my best.
Some books in the back of your office.
Those are just the books, by the way, that I'm working on for my current book. That else is in storage, but that is my focus right now, to finish the book.
And you will come to Switzerland, to Zurich. We'll have you here in a short time at an evening discussion with Markus Somm from Nebelspalter. We are looking forward to that. If I'm listening to you, somehow you seem quite to be young, 40 maybe, not much more, but you're totally at the right-wing side, a very conservative perspective. Is that correct?
That's not how I think of it. Other people might think of it that way. I hold a number of views that might be considered on the left. I support universal health care, legal abortion, decriminalized marijuana. I support a significant investment in improving psychiatric and addiction care. I am anti-war. For the most part, I'm very worried that the United States will get involved in Iran. I think that we should have a more critical posture towards Israel. I think that I've criticized the Trump administration for its policies around speech. I don't want to see any activity justified around speech, and some of the deportations and the revocation of visas has been on the basis of speech. I'm an independent politically. I'm not registered with either political party. And I consider myself, so I guess I would say, when people ask, I say I'm a liberal in my compassion for the vulnerable, I'm a libertarian in my love of freedom, and I'm a conservative in that I think you need civilization in order to protect both of them.
So how comes that everybody thinks this Michael Shellenberger is somehow over the top? He's just for Musk, for Trump, for and against all the climate Greta aficionados. How comes that you are positioned like this?
Well, I think it's a reflection of just how dominated the culture is by the left, to the point where people that are on the left aren't even aware of being on the left. I think that people on the left are not aware of conservative ideas. I don't think that they understand them. I don't think they understand, for example, the tragic vision of society. They don't understand that they have an unconstrained view. I think most people on the left don't understand the extent to which their ideas come from Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and that they are operating in a kind of dream world. I think Europeans in particular have been, in partly due to the United States, but I think that Europeans in particular have allowed themselves to live in a dream world where they think that this particular security arrangement with the United States through NATO will last forever. I don't think Europeans understand how seriously Americans take our First Amendment free speech rights. That's not a nice to have. That we are. I think Europeans don't understand the extent to which Americans are pretty sick of Europe. We're tired of the relationship. We don't like being told what to do, and we don't like the heavy burden of providing security to the world. In terms of my own reputation, because I was on the left and have been critical of the left, I'm a person that's been subject to pretty significant defamation campaigns for almost 20 years, and some of those campaigns have involved people that are funded by the U.S. government. One of the people that's been involved in advocating censorship worked for the CIA for 5 years, and she wrote a book that targeted me. And so there's been a concerted effort, I think, to create a caricature of myself and my views, both in Europe but also in the United States.
That's interesting. So, but you see yourself as a free speaker, free thinker, and people put you into a drawer, and that might be totally wrong. Not your problem. You have just said things about Europe. So Europe has a big problem because Europe is dominated by the left. Or what is your analysis about Europe?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, I'm a descendant of Swiss refugees who came here in the 18th century. I've never been to Switzerland. I'm very excited to go. My wife will join me, and we'll spend a week doing the typical vacation and tour. So we're very excited for it. I also care a lot about Europe. I have mixed feelings about it, like many Americans. I also feel very protective of Europe. We view Europe as the cradle of Western civilization, and we view that as very precious. And we feel obligated to continue to take care of Europe, but we want to have a better reset of that relationship. I think that the media environment has fallen apart in the United States. It hasn't fallen apart yet in Europe. In the United States, the mainstream news media no longer has credibility outside of a minority of Americans. About 25 to 30% of Americans approve of the Democrat Party, trust in the news media, trust in medical organizations. It's a fascinating moment because it's about 25 to 30% that support and that trust the major societal institutions in the United States. I think in Europe, those numbers are much higher still. The mainstream news media is viewed very skeptically. There's big questions around the future of one of our major news organizations, CNN. We don't know what the future of that news magazine is. I think that Europe and the United States, from World War II until the rise of social media, existed in a very controlled information environment. And that was an environment that was dominated by what I think we can fairly call the open society consensus. Open society being, of course, the framework created by Karl Popper, famously adopted by George Soros. And it was a strategy that made sense after World War II to open national borders to trade, to people, to ideas, to weaken national traditions, religion, ideology. It was a sort of a weakening, an opening and a weakening. And that made sense because after World War II, we didn't want to fight a third world war. We were very worried about communism. They wanted to Nazify Germany. But when you go 80 years later, that ideology has become its opposite. It's become very authoritarian. It's engaged in censorship. We saw very dramatically during COVID. We also see NATO engaged in censorship and hiding behind various think tanks to demand censorship. We've seen people align with NATO to engage in defamation campaigns against dissident intellectuals like Ulrike Guerreau of Germany, who has criticized the war in Ukraine. So we've seen a significant increase of abuses of governmental and societal institutional power over the last several years, particularly over the last 10 years, in reaction to the rise of right-wing nationalist and populist movements. And so now we're in this...
You say Europe has a bigger problem in that aspect. So Europe is far behind so you would say in the United States, at least you have this like fight between the right and the left, and then this skepticism against the traditional media and open-minded and open discussions, hard discussions, and Europe has not done that because of the fear of the ones who have the power, or is that your analysis?
Yeah, I think it's clearly the case. So if you just look at the largest nations of Europe, Germany, France, Britain, you see very powerful right-wing nationalist parties. In Germany, according to some polls, the AfD is the most popular party. In France, Le Pen was the front runner. Now she's facing lawfare. In Britain, Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch are competing over who is the most nationalist on the right. But you still see the media environment is not really been disrupted yet. And that's why the Europeans are very eager to censor X, formerly Twitter. They view it as a destabilizing media platform. And I think we're in for some very interesting times. Are they really going to prevent Marine Le Pen from running for president? We saw in Romania that the Supreme Court intervened to prevent the front runner from competing in the runoffs. Germany is very unstable, and you're seeing even the reconsideration of nuclear power. You see Merz, the new chancellor, moderating, saying that he did not think that the government should ban AfD. So I think Europe is in an extremely dynamic moment and probably will remain dynamic for at least another 5 years, which is how long it'll be before the next elections in Britain.
So that's interesting from your perspective, because we in Europe think, well, the Americans are crazy. You have this Donald Trump, and now he's sending national troops to your state, California. This is at the brink of a civil war now, and we are here in Europe, and things are still stable. Somehow your picture is a different one. You say the Europeans have a problem because there is somehow an authoritarian, a dictatorial thinking culture from the top down, from the ones who have the power. And we in the United States, at least we know what freedom means, and we have both sides fighting with their best arguments. Is that correct, what I'm saying?
Yeah, for me, I think you can summarize the European situation in a new concept that I only just learned, called the cordon sanitaire. The French word for the cleanliness, curtain or I guess wall, and the idea
like
is
a belt or a cordon,
cordon,
going around something to protect, to hold it together.
Yes, for me that's a perfect picture of the mentality that the European establishment, which I would call the NATO EU establishment, has, which is we're going to be able to marginalize and isolate the right-wing populist parties. We're going to call them far right. We're going to deprive them entrance into the Munich Security Conference. We're going to deprive them of rooms and offices to meet in. We're going to, we're going to tell the news media won't cover them, and when they do cover them, they'll compare them to fascists. There's this idea, I think, in Europe that that's going to work. And it did to some extent. I mean, when Trump was first elected in 2016, you saw the Europeans kind of held the line, and they got Biden elected. But you can see the Democratic Party it's in complete disarray. The internal conflicts are very dramatic, and the public has lost trust in the open society agenda. The public views open society agenda has delivered racial quotas, transgenderism, open borders, climate extremism, and those are not far-right views. These are mainstream views. 79% of Americans are against transgender sports. 71% are against trans medicine. The British government, under the Labour government, has banned trans medicine. The United States closed the southern border. After the Democrats said that they needed new legislation in Congress, Trump came in and closed the border. We see the governments of Europe are closing their borders to migration. We see that on climate change, nuclear power is fashionable. Having worked on nuclear power for a very long time, done a lot of hard work, I can tell you that's a big change, that nuclear power is now mainstream. Nuclear power was in the cordon sanitaire for many years. It was politically unacceptable in Europe to suggest that they should do more nuclear or even keep the nuclear plants open. We've seen a big backlash against renewables in all of these countries. Greta Thunberg is now in Palestine. I thought she was a climate activist. So you can see there's a disorientation occurring. There's aggressive efforts by Starmer, Merz, Macron, Sanchez, trying to keep the illusion, trying to protect the dream world that NATO and the EU has created since World War II of the open society. I'm telling you, it's falling apart. People don't believe it.
Isn't it still better than the chaos we see in the United States? That's my point. No, I mean, I'm here in Switzerland. Switzerland is a tiny country. When I look outside, I still think, well, it's gonna be fine. Europe, okay, more or less, I see the trouble that you're describing. But when I look over the Atlantic and I just read the news, I think, this is nuts what's going on in your country. But maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe you say, no, that's fine. It's just like swinging. No, before we had Biden, now we have Trump. And in 4 years' time, we will see who's next. No, but my view is you are lunatic. You are nuts. It's going wild out there in the United States. So I'm wrong.
No, I don't think you're wrong. I think that there is chaos that's occurring in the United States. I think that there is also chaos beneath the surface in Europe, and I think that the European leaders know that, and they're trying to cordon sanitaire the chaos. But I think it's coming. In other words, I think that there's something fundamentally changing in the global order that is not a 4-year change. It's at least an 80-year change, if not a 300-year change, in the sense that I think that there's something fundamentally, we're at the end of this idea that we can have this rationalist enlightenment, ordered order, and that everything is going to be structured in this particular way, and that globalization will continue forever, and that we're going to just integrate all the Muslims and then they'll assimilate. That vision is gone. I don't think Europeans even themselves believe that they're going to simply absorb the Muslim populations of the world and assimilate, and that they will become Europeans and they will embrace liberal democracy. That's simply not occurring. And I think that Europeans are starting to realize that there are fundamental differences in worldview and values of the people that you've been bringing to the country, and many of whom are now in ghettos. There is significant disruption, I believe, significant disruption coming both to it's already happening in the United States. I think it's coming to the relationship between the United States and Europe. And then I do think within 5 years, we're going to see significant changes as well in Europe.
So the question is, how will that play out? No, what is your prognosis towards these next 4 to 5 years or whatever in Europe? Will the governments be able, the old forces be able to turn around to keep the power, or will there be a revolution without anybody knowing what will happen? What's your plan, your idea of that?
Well, I mean, as you may know, experts are just as bad at predicting the future as anybody else, and I think experts who believe they can predict the future are foolish. I am more comfortable saying I think change will come. I also think that events, unpredictable events, who knows? China invades Taiwan, something happens with the Ukraine conflict, something happens with Iran that could destabilize the global order more. I do think that nationalists will win and will take power in many European countries. They may be more moderate than Trump, for example, because we saw Giorgia Meloni has governed much more as a center-right person than as a populist and nationalist. But I think that there's real questions around the future of NATO. There's big questions around the future of the U.S. dollar. We have a debt problem that we don't really have a solution for. And then finally, we have AI. And anybody that's used it knows that there's certainly a lot of hype, but AI potentially is going to be very disruptive in terms of white-collar professions, not just blue-collar professions. So I think that we're headed into a period of chaos. I think what I'm comfortable saying is that the next 20 years is not going to be like the last 20 years. It's much more likely to be something quite different than that.
Everything seemed to be stable. It wasn't. We had this huge money flow from the central banks, of course. We could manage crisis, and now we see it's not manageable. There is chaos, there is uncertainty. We all hope that this will not play out through wars, of course, because the war is always the baddest thing for everybody. Do you think there is hope somehow that this will not end in a terrible situation with wars and other conflict things that go out of control? Do you think there is this small path towards, somehow a peaceful and again maybe brighter future?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think there was a revolution in military with the invention of nuclear weapons, and so I think that this is another area where I think Europeans have lived in a dream world, and I think in part because they don't want to think about it. But the reality is that Europe exists under a nuclear umbrella, and the United States has extended that umbrella. And so we say NATO, but if NATO were to go away, France and England could extend the nuclear umbrella over Europe. And I think that that's probably more stable, is for there to be a European security where the umbrella is provided by France in England. There is no risk that any country will invade France because France has the force de frappe and it can bomb their cities and destroy cities from their submarine fleet. I think that Europe needs to expand significantly its own security arrangements and renegotiate those security arrangements within the EU and NATO. I think that's a good idea no matter what, given the uncertainty and instability in the United States. I also think that Japan and Korea need to have their own security, and I think they need to have atomic security as well. So I think that's changing. I worry about Iran. I worry very much that Israel's going to drag the United States into a conflict there, which is a terrible idea. We should want stability and peace in Europe. I don't agree with the Trump administration's aggressive posture on Iran. I think that Iran is a powerful regional force. We should not be fantasizing about overthrowing that government. We're very tired in the United States of invading other countries, and Iraq and Afghanistan. It was a very, very bitter experience, not just the wars, but then to lose Afghanistan, to just return it to the Taliban after 20 years was demoralizing for the United States. So what I get some faith from is I think that people need more than rationality. I think that people need some faith. They need some sense of the transcendent, that the Enlightenment was a wonderful thing, but under Rousseau, we saw that it quickly turned into the violence of the French Revolution. We saw a similar violence and totalitarianism under communism, and we've seen the radical left engage in very similar Rousseau-styled political religions. And so I think that what we have to take from this is that people need to believe in something bigger than themselves, and that rationality can't be the source of everything. And I think that we're starting to see some appreciation once again for the mythic, for the faith, for the religions, for the nationalisms that are so important to our national identity, and that we're not just I'm not Swiss, I'm not Swiss. 300 years ago, my ancestors came from Switzerland, but I'm American. You're Swiss. I love going to France. I love the French. I like the French being French. Nations are real. Nation states are real. National cultures are real. They're not obstacles to international peace. And we have a nuclear revolution. So my hope is in that there's a new consciousness that forms, that there's a rebalancing between this heavy globalist open society, turn everybody into pod people with vaccine passports and totalitarian censorship, to organic, national, cultural, religious difference, and that we appreciate each other in our national differences. We're not trying to demolish those differences like I think the open society consensus had been trying to do.
You could also be a preacher. I realized to come to an end, I would love to hear a little bit about Mr. Elon Musk. You have worked for him, no? The famous Twitter files. You were one of the members of the team who analyzed these Twitter files. The question was whether Twitter was biased during the last years, no? In COVID, in other things, Biden, the Hunter Biden affair, the son of the former president, things like this. And Elon Musk, when he bought Twitter for an astonishing amount of money, he said, I want to know whether there was this influential from the top of Twitter, former Twitter management, to all the Twitter employees, to somehow influence the opinions, to manipulate the public opinion. You were one of the members who analyzed this, and you happen to know Mr. Musk, I guess. What kind of people is he? What kind of person is this Elon Musk? This strange guy, in my view. How would you describe him?
Sure, and just to clarify, I was one of several independent journalists who covered the Twitter files, but we were never paid by Musk or Twitter. We're independent. He never asked us to do anything, and we had free access to the files and were able to cover them as objectively as a person can cover them. There was two things that were important. The first is that there was a very intense left-wing bias on the Twitter employees. They banned people who simply said that a man cannot become a woman through gender identification or drugs or surgery, that a man cannot become a woman. People were banned for saying that. We also discovered that there was widespread censorship of people saying accurate information about the COVID vaccine, for example. Our current director of the National Institutes of Health, Jay Bhattacharya, a very famous scientist from Stanford, he was on a blacklist inside of Twitter. And that was the first thing we discovered, and that was a political bias. The second thing we discovered was the involvement of the intelligence community directly, by which we mean the CIA, the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security. And they were in the process of basically taking control over the censorship, what they call content moderation of Twitter. And this was extremely shocking because it's a violation of the First Amendment. It also, the Hunter Biden laptop was a fascinating story because the FBI had the laptop, which showed, we call it influence peddling in the United States, selling access to Biden. The whole family was involved. And the laptop showed that in great detail. The FBI had the laptop in December 2019. And then in 2020, the FBI ran what they call an information operation, which was to basically prepare journalists and social media companies to censor the story about the laptop. And this was all revealed. We're looking at these internal emails, and it involved it revealed that the Aspen Institute, which is a very famous think tank, basically works for the intelligence community. And there had long been rumors. People sometimes call it the CIA think tank, Aspen. But we had in documents showing that they were running this FBI information operation. So that led then us to look around the world, and we discovered that in particular the United States and its allies, in particular Britain, but also the rest of Europe, were doing a very similar strategy, which was basically the government would create so-called third-party NGO fact checkers, and they would often be in alliance with the news media. And then their aim was to censor, they called it whole narratives, anti-vaccine narratives, for example, narratives critical of COVID, to censor not just a few posts, but we're talking millions of posts across all social media platforms. I mean, it was shocking. After we discovered this, there was many congressional hearings. It went to the Supreme Court. It's been a lot of discussion here. Trump cut the funding to the groups that were doing this in the United States. But it really has moved to Europe. It's moved, and now Brussels wants to do more of this censorship. We've seen the French do it. We've seen the Germans really do it. The Germans love to censor. So we're now very concerned that the Europeans are going to try to recreate the censorship industrial complex. And that's the part why I'm going to Zurich to give this talk and to kind of make friends and to build a free speech movement across borders.
Well, the good things about the Americans is when they find out that something's going wrong, they talk about it. They show the proofs, and there are these discussions, these hearings, these trying to change the course. That's interesting. Maybe we are not like this in Europe. I agree. Just tell me more, because I tried to find it out about Musk. Who's the guy, or how is he? I mean, we all think about him. Does he have a slight, strange guy, very rich, very open-minded, but now he has this fight with Trump. Why does he do that? Who's the guy?
Yeah, so I don't know Elon very well. I only met him twice. We're friendly, but we're not friends. Like, we don't hang out. So I don't know him personally well. But he's a pretty public figure, and everything you see, my experience of him was similar to what people see. He is obviously a genius technologically. I don't think people appreciate how difficult it was to create a rocket program, to put these satellites. And now Starlink is the best. It's going to be the best internet service because of these low orbit satellites. That alone is a significant achievement. I am not a huge electric car person, but the Teslas, he's made incredible advances in terms of artificial intelligence. And then I think it's important for people to know that his son was basically, that Elon says he was tricked into agreeing to letting his son be medically transitioned. Is this part of his gender affirming care? I think that it was part of his motivation to buy Twitter. I think his motivation to buy Twitter was good. I think that he saved free speech. I'm unabashed in my enthusiasm and my praise for Elon in terms of his defense of free speech. I think it's everything that people said it was. Is it perfect? No. You know, and is he perfect? No. He would definitely not say he's perfect. You know, you have to look at the conflict between him and Musk using mythological terms. You know, that these are not
The conflict between Trump and Musk. Yeah.
well, yeah, and the two men themselves are you can only make sense of them as like mythological figures. I mean, they're Trump's arc. You know, I mean, he was almost murdered on live television. I mean, he's just he was going to be in prison. You know, I mean, just the reversal of fortunes would have thrilled Shakespeare. You know, the Greek tragedians would have been. This is an incredible event. I mean, we're still sort of shocked by it. You know, everywhere. I don't know, you know, what's behind the Musk Trump thing more than anybody else. You know, you have in Musk somebody who has become, you know, the greatest technologist in the world's richest man, by expressing himself emotionally. And it's a shocking thing for all of us to see. I mean, Americans are less buttoned up than Europeans, but even Americans are shocked at the level of impropriety. Trump's himself is a very, you know, interesting character. I don't think that somebody who was more restrained, and these are two men who have become the most two powerful men in the world by breaking the rules.
Exactly. And now we have to finish here because now the time has running out. Okay. Michael, you are very welcome in Switzerland, in Zurich, on the 23rd of June. We'll have you here. Thank you very much for your time and for your expertise. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for having me.